let's talk about Ottawa's defense going into the 2024-25 season. Right now, the guys that I think you can have penciled in as starting will be Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot, Artem Zub, Nick Jensen, and I'm pretty sure Tyler Clevin is going to have that fifth spot locked in. I think the spot that's mostly up for grabs is that 60, the right-handed defenseman on that bottom pairing. And right now, we're looking at guys like Travis Hamonic, Jacob Bernard Docker, Kalen Addison, and Carter Yakemchuk, who has been quite the surprise in camp. So I'll throw it over to you first there, Matt. And, what have you seen from the defense in preseason so far? And who are you maybe expecting a little bit more from, or who have you been impressed by?
Well, I mean, uh, Sanderson continues to impress me. Every time he steps on the ice, it just shows that he is a physical specimen. And it's always kind of funny when we look back and people question the Jake Sanderson pick. And I mean, I'm sure at some point any of the three of us had a little inkling. Oh, was it the right pick? Damn right it was. Jake Sanderson is ready to break out this season. And he's been consistently stepping up these past few seasons, but I think he's ready to hit another gear this year. 40 plus points, and he's going to be staying as elite defensively as he has been in the past. And let's hope that's with Artem Zub, who's currently hurt, which is unfortunately a bit of a story with him. Can he be relied upon to get 70 plus games in? Because it hasn't happened often. And what could change it this year? Obviously, we now have the improved health and training facilities, updated team training roster and all that sort of stuff. So I really hope that Zub can come in and just be Mr. Consistent like he has been in the past, because when Sanderson and Zub are together, good things happen. And speaking of a guy who's looking for a steady D partner, Thomas Chabot is truly the king of what ifs. But is this the year that he finally gets to that stage in his career? He's a really good defenseman. And he just needs a good D partner. And it seems like they finally got him one in Nick Jensen, who, for quite some time has had a really solid career, except had a bit of an outlier season last year. But, I think his defensive metrics were better than Jacob Chikrin's last year. Obviously, you're giving up some of the offensive upside with Chikrin, but I think the stability of Nick Jensen makes Thomas Chabot better, which makes the team better. Because when Chabot's on, he's excellent and can very well be the best defenseman on the team. So we'll see. But then you have your third pair. And that's when you've got two young players and then an over the hill player who's struggled the last few seasons. I don't know if Tyler Clevin is the answer. And then JBD and Travis Hamonic are just two guys that have struggled mightily the last few seasons. So I don't have the highest hopes for our third pairing. I would love to have this clipped and they end up being exceptional. But for me, shelter them and play the big boys.
All right, Bennett, I'll flip it over to you and get your thoughts on the decor and how they're shaping up.
Yeah, I'm mostly going to echo what Nave said. The defense looks decent, but the third pairing is a little sus. And overall, I feel that, last year we were pretty confident in our decor heading into things, and that confidence was definitely misplaced. So I'm hesitant to bring too much optimism to looking at it this year in light of that. I think we were all confident that a full healthy season of Yakemchuk would really, unlock this Sens decor, and that did not happen at all. He was one of the worst defensive players on the team, and we ended up trading him for a pretty significant loss in the offseason. So that's about how well that went. This year, Jacob Sanderson continues to make the case that he's going to be an elite defender this league for a long time. Very few notes there. He's my favorite current Ottawa Senator. Hard to say anything wrong about him. If Zub can get healthy before the season starts, you expect that to be our top D pairing, and it's a good one. Thomas Chabot, we understand that he had some work done in the summer on. I don't know if they actually specified where his previous
I
injury
thought it
had
was
been.
was it
Yeah,
not
his
also his
wrist.
wrist? Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
wrist one. Yeah, that's interesting. There's two of our players with that issue. So we're hoping that he can establish himself as the Thomas Chabot that we all grew to know and love in the dog days of the Melnick years. And I think that if Jensen can establish himself as a competent D partner for him, that's great. I think that's where the certainties kind of end. We have Tyler Clevin slotting as our fifth defenseman, third pairing on that left-hand side. Clevin is a guy that I think we all expect to be an NHLer eventually. He might be getting pushed into the spotlight a little soon right now, but I also appreciate that, he has the size, he has the, most of the ability to make himself a decent shutdown, low minutes kind of guy in the third pair. I don't think it's a hugely tall ask, but it's just interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that goes, because he's certainly not a surefire thing at this point in his career. I really hope we don't see a lot of Travis Hamonic. I'm also not really sure how much we want or need to see of JBD. I think that he hasn't shown a ton at this point in his career with the Senators to justify him getting a full-time roster spot. So it might be, for the first couple weeks, a little bit of a case of rotating faces down in that sixth defenseman spot, between Hamonic and Addison if he sticks around, and JBD. That third pairing, like you said, Nate, if we can play those guys, like 10 minutes or fewer a night and lean on the big guys in the top two pairings, I think that's okay. But overall, I do have some concerns about that decor. Jensen is heading into his mid-30s. He's coming off a disappointing year. I think that it's one thing to expect guys to bounce back when they're on the lower end. When they're in their 20s, it's, if someone has a rough year, it's very reasonable to expect them to bounce back. If someone has a rough year in their early 30s or in their mid-30s, I think that there actually isn't really much of an expectation that they'll bounce back. Usually that's just their natural decline as a player. And, for every Sidney Crosby who continues to put up, incredible point numbers well deep into his 30s, 99% of players don't do that. They have a short, brief peak and then they decline. And, if I were a betting man, I would say that Jensen is probably one of those players. That being said, again, we're not asking too much of him. Just be on Chabot's pairing and try not to mess up more than once or twice a game. Can he do that at this point in career? We hope so. But I think I could very easily see the wheels coming off there and us needing to quickly pivot and find someone to fill in on that second line pairing. And hey, the way things are going, Yakemchuk might be able to do that. I mean, I think we would all prefer for him to spend some time down in junior and marinate a little further, maybe go on a nice cup run with a WHL team, and that could be really good for his development. But if the big team comes calling and they need his services, maybe something could be worked out. But overall, I think that there's 3.5 good defenders on this team. And is that enough? I don't know. You tell me.
Pittsburgh won a cup with like two. So
Yeah.
one of them
You
was
never
Ron
know.
Hainsey.
Yeah.
That's
Brian Dumoulin.
yeah, it's a question of, at 3.5 good defenders. Do you round up or down? Do you call it 4 or do you call it 3?
I
So
guess it depends on the goalie, and I'm sure
yeah.
we'll be getting to that shortly.
Yes. But first, I wanted to chime in and say what's also interesting about this defensive core is that you have three guys on your bottom pairing that are all going to be playing for a contract this season because Tyler Clevin and JBD are both going to be RFAs after this season. So they're going to be needing new contracts and they're both under team control. I think it's safe to say that barring an extravagant, splendid season from Travis Hamonic, he will likely become a free agent and Ottawa won't re sign him. And then we'll see what happens with Kalen Addison. I think there were times in games where I was like, okay, his puck movement's pretty good, but there's other times where he hasn't been so good. And so for me, I think they want to give him one more showing, but to me, he's on the cutting block. We'll see what happens to him. I think with Carter Yakemchuk, he's been a breath of fresh air. I think when you looked at the summer showcase and the prospect tournament, he had some pretty rough moments, but then in preseason action, obviously he had that beauty breakaway goal against the Leafs where he burned Marner. That was pretty fun. You also had him just being able to take the puck into the offensive zone a few times and playing in front of the home fans and had a couple nice little moves in the offensive zone to set up some goals. So I think that'll be nice to have in the future. Obviously, his defensive game is what's going to need work, which is what he came advertised as at the draft. So we'll see what happens there. I could see the Sens potentially giving him a 9-game stint at the start of the season just to see how he looks and then send him back down to junior to get, like Bennett said, marinate, go for a playoff run, see what happens there. But yeah, I mean, I'm really hoping that Nick Jensen has a rebound season. And aside from that, you're hoping for a healthy Zub. You need that hometown arena. We need to get those Zub chants going and make sure the man knows that he's beloved and needs to stay healthy. Um, you can't go wrong with Sandy, Dandy Sandy. He's a beaut. Yeah. So I think like aside from that, I don't know. The defensive core, I think health is really going to be the factor this year. I'm
Yeah.
not actually so worried about performance as I am health. And I guess that resembles some of our fears when it comes to like Josh Norris when we talked about the forwards previously. So, yeah.
There's just vastly more depth at forward than there is at D. And I think that's going to cause a bit of an issue.
Like if Zub gets injured and Yakemchuk is tied up in junior, then I don't really trust any of the other defenders within the system to step into that second pairing role or that top pairing role, as the case may be. Or, say the same of like if Jensen sucks, or God forbid, if Jensen sucks and Zub gets injured, then like that's the season, right? Like that, and it kind of sucks to be staring that in the face, right?
Yeah. I think that's obviously like worst case Ontario.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like a serious reality. And I think
I think it's like a very real possibility, like 50-50 for me. Like if Zub gets injured and misses a month and Jensen sucks and we lose 10 games, that's the season, right? That's you can't do that and make the playoffs. And that's kind of scary, right? That we're there's a lot riding on Jensen really bouncing back, and I think there's very little evidence to show that like that's a guarantee. Like he might not be as bad, but like yeah, I'm not so sure about that one.
yeah, it's a weird situation to be in. And obviously Yakimchuk gives us that added depth at D, but he's 18 or sorry, he's 19 as of like yesterday. So you don't want to put all that pressure on a kid. And I think that, we can talk about, or we have talked about Steve Stais offseason. It was pretty good, but I just felt like, he did address that right side, but there could have been more done. And so I think you're going to have to see who's available on waivers at some point or another, because if a name pops up that you think you can improve your team with, you should probably consider it.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
always a ton of cuts at the end of training camp. So
Yeah.
we'll see who gets cut, who might be, a sleeper, especially, and we'll get to coaching and front office later on. But yeah, that certainly something to think about.